Mr. Moderator, Reverend Cleed, and Milton, brothers and sisters, and friends, and I see some enemies. I think we'd be fooling ourselves if we had an audience this large and didn't realize that there were some enemies present. This afternoon, we want to talk about the ballot or the bullet. The ballot or the bullet explains itself. But before we get into it, since this is the year of the ballot or the bullet, I would like to clarify some things that refer to me personally concerning my own personal position. I'm still a Muslim. That is, my religion is still Islam. My religion is still Islam. I still credit Mr. Muhammad for what I know and what I am. He's the one who opened my eyes. And at present, I'm the minister of the newly founded Muslim Mosque Incorporated, which has its offices in the Teresa Hotel right in the heart of Harlem. That's the Black Belt in New York City. And when we realize that Adam Clayton Powell is a Christian minister, he has the Abyssinia Baptist Church, but at the same time, he's more famous for his political struggling. And Dr. King is a Christian minister from Atlanta, Georgia, but he's become more famous for being involved in the civil rights struggle. There's another in New York, Reverend Galamison. I don't know if you've heard of him out here. He's a Christian minister from Brooklyn, but has become famous for his fight against the segregated school system in Brooklyn. Reverend Cleed, right here, is a Christian minister here in Detroit. He's the head of the Freedom Now Party. All of these are Christian ministers. All of these are Christian ministers, but they don't come to us as Christian ministers. They come to us as fighters in some other category. I'm a Muslim minister. The same as they are Christian ministers, I'm a Muslim minister. And I don't believe in fighting today in any one front, but on all fronts. In fact, I'm a black nationalist freedom fighter. Islam is my religion, but I believe my religion is my personal business. It governs my personal life, my personal morals. And my religious philosophy is personal between me and the God in whom I believe, just as the religious philosophy of these others is between them and the God in whom they believe. And this is best this way. Were we to come out here discussing religion, we'd have too many differences from the outstart, and we could never get together. So today, though Islam is my religious philosophy, my political, economic, and social philosophy is black nationalism. You and I, as I say, if we bring up religion, we'll have differences, we'll have arguments, we'll never be able to get together. But if we keep our religion at home, keep our religion in the closet, keep our religion between ourselves and our God, but when we come out here, we have a fight that's common to all of us against the enemy who is common to all of us. The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that the black man should control the politics and the politicians in his own community. The time when white people can come in our community, and get us to vote for them so that they can be our political leaders and tell us what to do and what not to do is long gone. By the same token, the time when that same white man, knowing that your eyes are too far open, can send another Negro into the community, get you and me to support him so he can use him to lead us astray, those days are long gone. The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that if you and I are going to live in a black community, and that's where we're going to live, because as soon as you move into as soon as you move out of the black community into their community, it's mixed for a period of time, but they're gone, and you're right there all by yourself. We must understand the politics of our community, and we must know what politics is supposed to produce. We must know what part politics play in our lives. And until we become politically mature, we will always be misled, led astray, or deceived or maneuvered into supporting someone politically who doesn't have the good of our community at heart. So the political philosophy of black nationalism only means that we will have to carry on a political program of re-education to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature. And then we will, whenever we get ready to cast our ballot, that ballot will be cast for a man of the community who has the good of the community at heart. And the economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that we should own and operate and control the economy of our community. You can't open up a black store in a white community. White man won't even patronize you. And he's not wrong. He got sense enough to look out for himself. And you who don't have sense enough to look out for yourself. The white man is too intelligent to let someone else come and gain control of the economy of his community. But you will let anybody come in and control the economy of your community. Control the housing, control the education, control the jobs, control the businesses under the pretext that you want to integrate. No, you're out of your mind. The economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that we have to become involved in a program of re-education to educate our people into the importance of knowing that when you spend your dollar out of the community in which you live, the community in which you spend your money becomes richer and richer. The community out of which you take your money becomes poorer and poorer. And because these Negroes who have been misled, misguided, are breaking their necks to take their money and spend it with the man. The man is becoming richer and richer, and you're becoming poorer and poorer. And then what happens? The community in which you live becomes a slum. It becomes a ghetto. The conditions become run down. And then you have the audacity to complain about poor housing in a rundown community. Why, you run it down yourself when you take your dollar out. And you and I are in a double trap, because not only do we lose by taking our money someplace else and spending it, when we try and spend it in our own community, we're trapped because we haven't had sense enough to set up stores and control the businesses of our community. The man who's controlling the stores in our community is a man who doesn't look like we do. He's a man who doesn't even live in the community. So you and I, even when we try and spend our money in the block where we live or the area where we live, we're spending it with a man who, when the sun goes down, takes that basket full of money in another part of the town. So we're trapped, double trapped, triple trapped. Anywhere we go, we find that we're trapped. And every kind of solution that someone comes up with is just another trap. But the political and economic philosophy of black nationalism shows our people the importance of setting up these little stores and developing them and expanding them into larger operations. Woolworth didn't start out big like they are today. They started out with a dime store and expanded and expanded and expanded until today they're all over the country and all over the world, and they're getting some of everybody's money. Now, this, what you and I in General Motors, the same way, didn't start out like it is. It started out just a little rat race type operation, and it expanded and expanded until today is where it is right now. And you and I have to make a start. And the best place to start is right in the community where we live. So our people not only have to be re-educated to the importance of supporting black business, but the black man himself has to be made aware of the importance of going into business. And once you and I go into business, we own and operate at least the businesses in our community. What we will be doing is developing a situation wherein we will actually be able to create employment for the people in the community. And once you can create some employment in the community where you live, it will eliminate the necessity of you and me having to act ignorantly and disgracefully, boycotting and picketing some cracker someplace else, trying to beg him for a job. Anytime you have to rely upon your enemy for a job, you're in bad shape. And he is your enemy. Anytime, you wouldn't be in this country if some enemy hadn't kidnapped you and brought you here. On the other hand, some of you think you came here on the Mayflower. So as you can see, brothers and sisters, today, this afternoon, it's not our intention to discuss religion. We're going to forget religion. If we bring up religion, we'll be in an argument. And the best way to keep away from arguments and differences, as I said earlier, put your religion at home, in the closet. Keep it between you and your God. Because if it hasn't done anything more for you than it has, you need to forget it anyway. Whether you are a Christian or a Muslim or a nationalist, we all have the same problem. They don't hang you because you're a Baptist, they hang you because you're black. They don't attack me because I'm a Muslim, they attack me because I'm black. They attack all of us for the same reason. All of us catch hell from the same enemy. We're all in the same bag, in the same boat. We suffer political oppression, economic exploitation, and social degradation. All of them from the same enemy. The government has failed us. You can't deny that. Anytime you live in the 20th century, 1964, and you walking around here singing, "We shall overcome," the government has failed.
I'm going to replay that just a little bit just so I catch that last part. Please feel free at any moment to ask for a playback. Just a quick 30 seconds.
They attack all of us for the same reason. All of us catch hell from the same enemy. We're all in the same bag, in the same boat. We suffer political oppression, economic exploitation, and social degradation. All of them from the same enemy. The government has failed us. You can't deny that. Anytime you live in the 20th century, 1964, and you walking around here singing, "We shall overcome," the government has failed.
One more time, just one more time.
From the same enemy. We're all in the same bag, in the same boat. We suffer political oppression, economic exploitation, and social degradation. All of them from the same enemy. The government has failed us. You can't deny that. Anytime you live in the 20th century, 1964, and you walking around here singing, "We shall overcome," the government has failed. This is part of what's wrong with you. You do too much singing. Today it's time to stop singing and start swinging. You can't sing up on freedom, but you can swing up on some freedom. Cassius Clay can sing, but singing didn't help him to become the heavyweight champion of the world. Swinging helped him. So this government has failed us. The government itself has failed us. And the white liberals who have been posing as our friends have failed us. And once we see that all these other sources to which we've turned have failed, we stop turning to them and turn to ourselves. We need a self-help program, a do-it-yourself philosophy.
All right. So I wanted to pause there for a quick second, bring us back into focus. Let me stop the screen share just so we could have some time to kind of in real time break down what we are capturing. So I just ain't no flow, but one thing that I know is gonna come up, so I just want to cut the elephant in the room. Black nationalism. There's kind of a sticky situation going on with the word and terminology of nationalism right now, as we see American nationalism being painted in a view that is pretty racist, flat out. Ain't no other way to describe it. But the way that we hear Malcolm talk about nationalism, I wonder, does that differentiate at all? And if so, how? That's just how I'm gonna pose the first, question. Not that this is even like one of them, but just to get us thinking, you know, and drawing some relevancies that are happening today, and some of what he's talking about back in 1964. And I can continue on if y'all ain't gonna jump in.
Yeah, okay. Well, I like what you're saying about Black nationalism, because just even looking at the definition of nationalism and the way that he's talking about in his speech, it's really deterring a lot of the things that aren't for us that should be for us and our rights in the country, to our nation, Black people, and for the interest and the benefit of Black people, to uplift us and really give us those basic necessities and seats at the table that we should already have. And it's interesting to hear about it in 1964 in that scope, because it's kind of the same thing now. And even though we do have Black people at the table, whether we're talking about Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, et cetera, the benefit factor really is not there for the Black community. And it's played in so many different ways. But what we've seen, and I think he's addressed it as well, is white politicians using Black people specifically for their interests in our communities to garnish our votes. And I think
which they still
hearing
do.
about that it's happening in 1964 and still now, trying to find a way to strategize out of that, or what are those next steps to really move forward from that, because it is still a really rich and deep problem, in my opinion.
What do you think, Rico?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think everything that he said was super relevant for today as well. I feel like we're in a mirrored time. Like when when he said like if you still have to sing "We Shall Overcome" in 1964, then the government's failed you. But I feel like we're at a point where like we're gonna be singing that in November. Like,
I feel like we are. We're screaming at the top of our lungs that Black Lives Matter in 2020.
Well, for me, also, it felt like a kind of a triggering moment hearing that and also reading it, just because in that moment I thought about the March on Washington that we all just did.
Right.
And I was just like, wow, we still are, and maybe not singing that exact song, but we're singing and chanting a lot of different chants that are saying that same message. And so that like moment, and just rehearing that again and revisiting that was just like, wow, we really are doing this, but just like in a different scope, at a different angle, but the same thing.
Yeah, so it really begs to question if much progress has come, if we still even have to reassert our own humanity, in my opinion. So what I got from even the Black nationalism, as he described it, was that it's not religious and it's not gendered. I think those are two really sensitive points that a lot of the folks who play on identity politics, who are traditionally white liberals, um, and even the conservatives, they play really deeply into that fascist uh, ideology, even right now under the nationalism guise. But to hear it so I think it only is different because it's talking about Black people. As you know, in reality, that's the real difference in the context behind why it's addressing Black people and its relevancy today is that it's still something that we have yet to systemically address. We keep putting like band-aids on it. And then we run into issues within the oppression Olympics, like, oh, well, is this inclusive to this person? And I feel like we are the only people that always have to consider other people. And we have yet to have a space where we can really redevelop. Like he says, we need a program for political re-education. I like how he broke it down into kind of three parts: political philosophy, economic philosophy, and both of them touch on education, which will then be the ultimate philosophy of needing a overarching re-education that's system wide.
Well, just even setting back to your point on nationalism, because I think that's important to talk about. Why, when we have that conversation, it's not the same in a lot of aspects across the board. I think a part of that is the systematic reasons, and how that's still been instilled and engraved in our systems for a long time. But I feel like we do still have some scope of that conversation when we do talk about some white nationalists, because that could be militias or different groups like that. Because nationalism is really just pro or the I guess you're hyping up or trying to get resources or deter resources for your particular group of people. And a lot of times, and especially in these type of situations, it's a race. It's either Black people or it's white people, or sometimes it's smaller or more focused groups of people. But I think that we do see that in other situations, and not just Black nationalists, if you will, but it is heavier when it comes to Black people. And I think a lot of that has to do with the systematic things that are going on in there, in my opinion. I don't know if I articulated that well, but
No, I get it.
I like how he contextualized from the beginning. Like, I know that the conversation of like religion is going to divide us. Let's separate ourselves from our individual differences and understand that like we need to prioritize Black nationalism. And I think that a lot of the times, and especially when it comes to like how Black people are used and or involved in politics, comes to a point where they're always fighting for a secondary agenda or a primary agenda, and like the secondary agenda seems to always be the Black nationalist agenda, and that has been at the detriment of us to the point where now we're still repeating things that were being said in 1964.
Can you elaborate on
yeah,
that?
can you just break that down?
'Cause
I like
I-
what you're saying. Yeah,
And I
like
think
where you're
that
going, but
for
a
those who
little bit
will
more.
see that, they would
So I
need to
can-
like you to really I understand you. I think we understand you, but just
I'm getting the scope of
humor
it, but I would
us.
like for you to dissect it just a little bit more for me if you don't mind.
What part?
Well, when you
about
talk
the,
about the secondary agenda usually being a Black nationalist agenda and how that's usually at the determinant of the community, I think you were saying, just like a little bit more of what you mean by that being a Black nationalist agenda and why that is more at a detriment to our community than that primary agenda, and why maybe that is focused on, or maybe why that's attached and grasped onto and like kind of hidden from everyone. If you kind of go around,
because
it's kind of a big question.
Well, okay, because I feel like a lot of the
I'm trying to
times,
understand how.
like a lot of movements that start as, or even a lot of movements start as being Black nationalist movements get co-opted and morphed into something that doesn't actually lead to any of the things that are laid out in mission statements or like purpose plans. And then you'll have the complete inverse where you'll have uh, uh, maybe some sort of organization or a policy that's like for in a specific community that gets a tag on, and it seems to be the only way that
anything gets done
anything
for
gets
that
done.
community.
Anything gets done for that community, exactly. That like for some reason like a small crumb of Black liberation was handed down through some sort of fishing bill that was passed. Like
Yeah, so I get what you're saying, but I thought where I immediately went with what you said was about like there always being like this is plan A or Black nationalism. So what I immediately thought of was the kind of comparison between like Martin's philosophy of the nonviolence approach and how that was received differently, where it considered actionables than Malcolm's philosophy, which had the singular solution but different approaches. And then it allowed for, by having this way, a lot of other things to be tagged in to like what you're saying, like added into a policy where then it kind of starts to chip away at centering Blackness and is now a woman's issue or
Right.
this particular group that is actively dividing up the identity.
Okay. This is a great conversation. I want to kind of step into it a little bit because I think it's interesting, especially how you broke that down and that secondary piece, right? Because just thinking about that in a political science major right now and just studying politics, it's very political, and in my opinion, just because that's really how politics works. Well, that attach element. So when there's legislation that's being voted in or put through, and on the face of it, you'd have like maybe Obamacare. Well, in that, there could be legislation also when it comes to energy, legislation on when it comes to transportation stuff, because one bill, there's going to be a ton of legislation there usually. It's this political type of, I don't know, way that they do things, but I forget what it's called, there's a word for it, but I think it's interesting because in that conversation, I was just thinking to myself, like, well, how do we get away from that political scope, that political outline, that political setup when it's about our lives and it's more humanitarian? But that is interesting because that is literally how politics has been in our country.
And
there's always that attached.
I want to ask you about that. The attachment point, like, so do you think that like it's necessary for us to be using a system in which we have like energy concerns and a healthcare bill? Like, why would we intentionally make it more complicated, if not to obfuscate certain communities from interacting in the political landscape of our country?
Compromise. as my understanding of it, I don't know really too much, but in my understanding of the way things that have worked, especially when it comes to Congress and stuff, usually if you want something, because there's a certain amount of senators and people who are going to vote on bills, if you want something, the other the other side of the aisle also wants something. So a lot of times when you're putting those bills together, and most senators and stuff don't push a lot of bills together by themselves. They usually sponsor it with other senators. So reaching across the aisle in that compromise part is allowing other people to add stuff to your bill so that they get stuff out of it as well as you in order to garnish their vote and their support. And so it's all political, but in that aspect, I'm not really sure why because I'm not graduated yet, really versed in it, but that moment hit a triggering moment for me, or not a triggering moment, but just a moment of memory of like, wow, okay, this is kind of how it's played out when we're studying politics. And even when I was in youth and government, even we were acting as representatives and senators. That's how the structure was.
Yeah.
There was always more in that bill, and on the face of it, it could be about healthcare or it could be about energy. But in that, there were things that had nothing to do with that because you were garnishing those votes, you were garnishing that support so that bill can pass through. Otherwise, it may not pass.
And I like love that conceptually, but it seems to it seems to me to be a problem when reaching across the aisle isn't an equal distance anymore. Like, um, we're supposed to be coming to the middle to compromise in like some sort of centrist policies, but now the center is way right of center because instead of having a conversation with, I don't know, some sort of rational person, now we have to have conversations with white supremacists and fascists. Like,
And all others who also fit into this group that doesn't directly center this.
so now black people are responsible for liberating all disenfranchised folk on the backs of themselves.
Without ever getting that reconstruction promise of economic opportunity to engage, because as you know, during the reconstruction, after those 7 years, KKK sprang up and terrorized and all of that, which really disengaged black folks even more, and then also gave way for like sharecropping and other more oppressive political tools that were used. And I just wanted to kind of just bring back up though, like it goes to support, this conversation that we're having goes to support Malcolm's point of a need for re-education politically, because you said you were in youth government. How many of us was in there? Which,
Not a lot. I mean,
you know,
but it is mostly students coming from the suburbs, and there's a handful of us that got the opportunity, but that opportunity had to be sponsored for us to even
sponsored,
be in the program.
meaning what? What is,
Meaning that, I mean, it was hundreds of dollars for us to
it
participate.
costs.
And then to stay at the hotels, to be at the conference and the convention centers, to engage, to get the materials, to understand and get that training, you had to pay for that, of course. And so, I mean, of course, working poor class folks in middle school and high school, we didn't have the resources for that. Barely have that for sports and stuff. And so we had to get those sponsors for that.
So Skip, who was in your cohort, when you went to these events and spaces, how many of us was in those spaces facilitating any of that?
I would say there were, I mean, maybe a handful of black and brown bodies in there. I mean, there were quite a few, but I was mainly the Minnesota group. There, it's a national program, and I mean, they have a big conference that they usually do in Chicago. And there were like the vice president for one of the years was a black guy, and very smart, intelligent guy. Like, and there were quite a few of us involved. It was not the what's the word? The people that were black and brown did not mainly come from the cities, the inner cities. They were suburban kids.
Oh, that's a whole nother
I
conversation.
think that, I think that's interesting too. It speaks to the class, but we were the city kids, but mostly all of those schools and everyone that was involved were suburban kids from the outskirts. And I thought that was interesting because it really shows where those resources were and the opportunity was. But to bring you guys this point back, because I thought it was interesting what both of you were saying about the issue with the attachments and stuff, because I think that's something that Malcolm X was talking about in 1964, specifically when he was speaking about, you know, the segregationalists and how we're voting for these people, but not only voting for these people, some of them, and like he talks about the, you know, people who are pretend liberals, but these people that we're voting in to give us a little bit are also people who are going to go in back rooms and vote against us. And I think that's an interesting point because it's the same thing that, you know, that happens now with that strategy of attachment and compromise. It's a lot of times, in my opinion now, just in my understanding, not really a choice if you want to get something done. And so, what do we need to do to change that strategy? And I think it's like the same conversation when we talk about the Constitution and what we need to do to change that because it doesn't fit, especially Black and brown bodies in this country. And so, it's a real problem, but I think it's a problem that's been so engraved in our country and our society for so long. It's one that we're really going to have to look at and break down and strategize and work at breaking down because it is an issue, but in order for even Democrats, Independents, Republicans, any of them to move those bills forward, they typically always have to step across the aisle. And usually when they don't, in special situations, and what we've seen in the last 4 years is when they control the Senate and there's a majority. But even sometimes when there is a majority, it's a small majority and they still have to cross the aisle for certain things.
I'm
So
gonna
I
pause
think
this
that's interesting.
there. I'm gonna pause this there, and we're gonna listen to the next 15 minutes and then do another breakdown.